Hello. This initial lecture here is going to be kind of an introduction to literary analysis and short stories, kind of what we're going to do over the course of the term. I encourage you before you watch this video, if you have not done so already, please go on to D2L and read Critical Lenses, Literary Analysis, and the Reader Response um, essay instructions before you get into this. All the readings for today. There's some other things about short stories and those kind of elements. Please do all that reading before you watch this. Okay, I'll wait. Okay, maybe not. All right. So please do that first. I do want to mention right off the bat, though, this is a Composition 2 class, not a literary theory class. Okay. I'm not going to do that to you guys. I wouldn't do that to you. Literary theory is, if you imagine an iceberg with the tip of the iceberg, right? Little teeny time. It's a huge body of ice underneath the water. That's literary theory. It's mysterious. It's vast. It's very crazy. We're not going to be there. We're going to be on the very tippity top of the top ice cube of literary theory. So a couple of things when you read the critical lenses, that's pretty much the big clubs in the bag for almost all critical theory that you're going to see in college, certainly if you go into grad school. But for right now, we're just dipping our toe lightly into it just so we have a frame of reference to talk about this stuff. Because as we know, and I'll remind you too, is that we're looking at short stories in particular, but this is all art, whether it's a short story or a film or a movie or a song or a sculpture or a painting. All art is more than entertainment value. Certainly the artist intends it to be so. And what we're looking at here is looking at these things critically to see what they can reveal about themselves and maybe about humanity or society at large. So that being said, all stories have the same elements, okay? The question is, why does this particular author use this or that particular device or theme in this particular story? A thesis I see all the time, which is not really a thesis, is something like, X author uses symbolism in this story. Yes, that's true, perhaps, but all authors do to some degree do that. That's not really the news. The question is, why is it relevant in this particular story? What does it say? What can we do? Right? That's an observation. They all use the same tools. We need the meaning is in the particulars, and that's what your thesis needs to be about, and certainly the thinking that you're going to do in these particular stories about these stories. So when you're looking at, and two, never waste a reading. You just don't have that kind of time in college to like just casually read a story. And don't expect that one reading is going to just go, oh, I understand. This is a rumination on human life in a godless universe or whatever. It's not going to be that obvious. You're going to have to kind of make it rain a lot of ways. And what I'm going to try to do in these little lectures is kind of give you some things, because ultimately, when you go to the library databases, which is what you should be doing when you do research, not in this first paper, but certainly in the last two papers, the keywords and the special terms you can use to plug into the databases to help filter out results to get to certain things. That's what this is all about, all right? So one of the things you want to do when you read the story is always pay attention to look at the author's lifespan when he or she was alive. If you're not told otherwise, and I don't think anything in this particular semester we're reading is anything other than this, like in the future, in the past. There's a year on the very last day of the story. That is the today of the story. So if a story is published in 1894, well then the today of that story is 1894. If that makes any sense. Okay, so always look for the given circumstances. Time is a big one. The considerations of time, not just, and that could mean a lot of things. It could mean the time of day. It could mean the time of year. Seasons are very important. If you really think about it, seasons are very symbolic of a human life. You know, you're born into spring, it's new life, and the summer is the work, the fall is you get old, and then winter is death, and then the circle of life, you know, you're back into it, and that's what that reassures humanity that there is a continuity. So anytime you're told what a particular season is, it's important because it's not just happenstance. And also then the today of the story. So all of those things, the historical perspective, given with those circumstances about time and place. Place is another thing. There's location and locale. Location is it in a house? Is it a church? If it is in a house, why is it in a house? In a church, if it's in a house or a church, why in this particular room and not this particular room? These are all choices that the writer makes. It has meaning, okay? Because these stories, if you had a novel, you could have wars and generational conflict and huge things happen and thousands of years pass. In a short story, you don't have that luxury, so it's kind of boiled down like a bouillon cube. So everything means something. Okay, so when you're looking at these stories, all of these the ways they're put together, they all have the similar aspects, but why are they put together in this particular story in this particular way? What is it, inside or is outside? If you're not told about these particular places or times, does that mean something? Okay. Now I want to mention a little thing about plot. Okay. Plot is just a sequence of events. This happens, then this happens, and this happens. The end. It is usually not something you want to talk about in your paper. You can assume your readers know the plot of the story. Plot is something you want to get into if you're doing a book report. That is not what this is. So that is synopsis. Synopsis is not analysis or anything. So don't retell the story in your paper. Okay. So typically plot is not a real good thing to focus on. Okay, when it comes to things to talk about. Now, stories are characters doing things. Okay. It's important to realize what characters are and what characters are not. Okay, characters are not real people. They're not supposed to be real people. Okay, they look and act like real people, but they're not. Okay, they exist for a certain purpose in the story, and the purpose is to encounter some obstacles and some conflict and learn something about himself or herself. Okay, the thing about you'll find in short fiction is that all of these characters are in what are in crisis. These protagonists are all in crisis, and what crisis literally means, it comes from the Greek krisis. If you just change the C to a K and pronounce it a little bit a different way, it's the same exact word. But krisis literally means a turning towards. Okay, so it's something that makes you stop and have to face it. Okay, so in these stories, it may not be something like a war or something really big and heavy. It might be something in the first story that we read is something very slight that happens in someone's mind. It could be someone's mind has changed or not changed. It could be that they learn something or not learn something. These are all, and don't look for any happy endings in these stories. There aren't any, and I don't know why, but that just happens. At the best, it's ambiguous endings. But with characters, though, they exist to do certain things, and depending on what they might represent, that's important. Okay, I'm not going to test you on this stuff, but you may have heard this in high school: flat versus round characters. The round characters will be ones that have flesh, ones that are fleshed out. Literally, think about a round character being plump. They're the ones, the protagonists, that can do things and learn things and actually have fun in a story, so to speak. Flat characters just exist for the round characters to respond to. Here's an example. In every romantic comedy you've ever seen, okay, and they're all the same. Boy meets girl, usually. They meet cute. They dance around each other. They decide to go for it. Then the ex-girlfriend leaves a voicemail that the new girlfriend hears, and she dumps him. And they get in a big fight, and it's like they never should have been together to begin with. And then he's off drowning his sorrows at a bar. Okay, and you know the scene. It's a movie bar, so that means there's nobody there. They have the best jukebox in the world. Okay, and it's just like the protagonist at the bar with his drink and the bartender cleaning his glass. Okay, and the bartender walks up to the guy and says, "Hey, buddy, looks like you could use a stiff one." And so he slides over a drink, and so then the protagonist proceeds to spill his guts about how he can't stand her, and they never should have ever even given her a chance to begin with, and he should have listened to his best friend, who all, the best friends are always the same, but pretty soon he's talked himself into realizing that she's the one for him, and he pays his tab and runs out to the airport, and they the roll credits and live happily ever after. Okay, that bartender exists in the universe for one thing only. Okay. You could, when that protagonist leaves that bar, okay, and it could stay gone 1,000 years and come back, that bartender is still going to be there cleaning the glass because he doesn't have any other job than to give the protagonist a reason to say the things that are in his head or his heart in this case, okay? Otherwise, he's sitting at a bar getting drunk. Why do we know what's going on in his head unless he tells us, okay? So the bartender there is a flat character that is a plot device, okay? So once you kind of see how these things are put together, you'll see that some characters have more say in the story or more value, more meaning than others, and so you'll know who the important ones are. Typically in these short stories, there aren't that many characters to begin with, so it's not really going to be that difficult. But don't get wrapped up in whether it's realistic or not, okay? Something that's realistic doesn't mean that it's actually real life. Have you ever looked at real life? I mean, really look at real life, like gone to a mall or something, if you still go to a mall, and sit down and just watch people, like nothing happens, okay? Real life is very boring. But you watch, I don't know, one of the 27 different Law and Orders, okay? And it's, they're in the lieutenant's office and they're drinking the coffee, and the coffee's the same coffee that they serve in New York City, and there's stuff on the bulletin boards, and it looks like a really bustling, police station, and they're talking, and the camera's all moving all, all gritty like, and they say, oh yeah, we really can't get moving on this case until we get that report from the coroner, and then ring, 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 the phone rings, and wouldn't you know it, it's the coroner. What are the odds that they're going to need it right that particular time? Okay, so all those things serve to give a realistic sort of background to make it seem real, but it's not real. Okay, so don't get wrapped up in that kind of stuff. Really, what you want to be concerned about is a concept called representation. Okay, when we get into talking about the story of an hour, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Mallard aren't just a particular husband and particular wife in one particular marriage. They are all husbands and all wives in all marriages, okay? They represent that. Representation is kind of like symbolism in a way, not really the same. Okay, for example, if I asked you who Moby Dick was, all of you would know it's a white whale. If I asked how many of you actually read Moby Dick, none of you have. Don't even bother lying about it. I know you haven't. If you have, then good for you, okay? I hadn't even read the whole thing yet. It's a long book, okay? But we know that Moby Dick is a symbol of something, okay? Melville, when he wrote that novel years ago, okay, by the way, he died penniless. He knew that if he told you exactly what that whale meant, that it wouldn't be that interesting. But that if he didn't tell you, you would know it deep down and you would always wonder what it is. And so here we are 200 some odd years later. I'm still mentioning it. You don't even know the book itself. Most of you don't, but you know who the character is, or I guess the thing Moby Dick is. That's the power of a symbol. Okay. You don't really know what it is, but it's got to be something. So look for that, and representations akin to that, because it's once you kind of know, okay, this guy's a priest and this is his sister or whatever, well then the priest may be able to represent not just maybe God or morality or something. I don't know. I mean, it just depends on what the story is. Okay. So that's what you're looking at when you're looking at characters, places, symbolism. It can be people, it can be places, it can be an action. Okay, anything can be symbolism. All you're trying to do is scare up something. You can get 3 to 5 to 7 pages or whatever it is out of it, depending on the assignment. Okay, that's what you're trying to do, is just scare something up. And these sorts of things I'm asking you to think about, coupled with those critical lenses, can get you something out of the bushes that you can then hone into something to say in a nice little essay. Okay. Other things to think about are theme. Okay, there are only so many themes: good versus evil, generational conflict, heaven and hell. I mean, the sins of the father. They're big. Okay, so a lot of these star-crossed lovers. I mean, they're all kind of the same, but depending on where they're set, maybe there's something to be said about that. Okay, so maybe that's social relevance is always important. I'm having you guys read a lot of things that have to do with race and culture and history. All those kind of things do speak to a cultural relevance, social relevance, and a universal relevance. Because as I've said, this art, and in particular literature, speaks to our humanity. And the best of these and the best of art always asks questions. It doesn't necessarily give you that many answers. Okay, so in this particular case, as we read some of these stories in the short fiction, these are just some things to be thinking about that I will be bringing up again and again in our discussions. So we'll see you soon.